Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me this afternoon, we have Matt Moore, Global Leader of Risk and Compliance Protiviti, as well as Dr. Mark Beasley, Professor and Director of the ERM Initiative at the Poole College of Management at North Carolina State University. We're here to discuss which issues are priority for the C-suite and board members and how leaders are mitigating current and emerging risks. It is great to have the both of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Matt, I want to kick this off with you if you can give us a high-level overview of Protiviti's annual top risks survey.
Sure, Jill. Protiviti and NC State conduct a survey annually of over 1,000 C-level executives and board members to really get their views on what are the risks they see in the upcoming year and looking a decade out.
Yeah, so some of the key findings that I had picked up on are business risks are no longer standalone threats. It really does have to be part of the overall model as they're interrelated.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the interconnectedness kind of present itself more and more. And so no longer are organizations able to really focus on the discrete things that pressure their business. Now they really need to think about the strategic risks that they face, kind of the operational readiness and risks that there are. And of course, what are the economic and financial factors that pressure their business?
Right. And Dr. Beasley, what about the skill set and the interaction of talent and innovation? What perspective are you seeing from the academic angle?
Yeah, when you look at just the interaction of risk, as I like to tell people, risk don't pay attention to your org chart. So you need skills across all the organization in multiple silos, whether it be technology, finance, sales. So I think that the messages of the interrelationship of the skills in the survey, which talent was in the top 5, 3 different aspects of that, as well as just concerns about, can I get the skill I need to deploy and take advantage of emerging technologies like AI? So I think the interconnectivity of I need skills to help me with innovation as well as just managing the basics. It's across all dimensions and have to look at it more holistically.
You certainly do, because as emerging technologies are evolving at a velocity much quicker with each iteration of it, so is the current macro political social environment. It's moving just as quick as the technology and the risk strategy itself.
Absolutely. I mean, it's moving very rapidly, and they're, as you pointed out earlier, interconnected. So I've got concerns about the economy, but that ties into the talent. Will I be able to get the talent I need? Do I have too much talent? Do I have enough, or is it the right talent? As well as just the whole intersection of what's going on now in the geopolitical sphere can trigger other unrelated risk, I guess, in some ways, but connected to it. Just when you think about concerns related to cyber, could that lead to some concerns with potential cyber attack, from that dimension? So
yeah,
it's all very connected. That was my point.
Yeah, no, it is all connected. And we're going to get into cyber more specifically in just a moment. That strategy has certainly evolved. And Matt, part of that is in the past 5 years, think of what business leaders have had to deal with, right? Just before COVID, everyone's, moving their systems to the cloud or thinking of a hybrid environment. Then you get COVID and supply chain concerns and so forth. They've had a lot to deal with in 5 years. So how do business leaders ultimately feel about their organization's resilience as it stands right now?
Yeah, Jill, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, in the last 5 years, there have been multiple 100-year events, right? And so many leaders consider themselves and their organizations pretty battle tested. So in some respects, they have confidence coming into this environment in that they've been through a global pandemic, they've navigated supply chain disruptions, they've gone through arguably the toughest talent war in history, and they're still standing and many are thriving. And so that confidence clearly came through in the survey. And frankly, it's needed because the stress that they're under in this environment might be even more extreme than any of those individual events over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it certainly does feel like that. It's just it's evolving at a rate that has been a bit shocking. So when you think about the number one near-term risk, how are respondents thinking about it? What's their number one concern?
Yeah, I mean, the number one concern that came out clearly in the survey, it's economic outlook and economic uncertainty. And if you kind of tease that apart, there are a lot of factors that go in there. Obviously, they're concerned about what the future might hold in terms of inflation, kind of the jobs market, interest rates, trade policy is obviously there as well. But similarly, they're concerned about their organization's rate of change and ability to keep pace and harness capabilities that emerging advanced technologies offer, but also the threats and risks that those present and how those might impact their financial outlook.
Yeah, and Dr. Beasley, an area that stood out to me as well is rethinking the model and what your return on investment looks like. Where are you allocating resources when you're thinking about business continuity and perhaps not so much about driving revenue? I feel like there's been a big shift as well when you're thinking about where you want to allocate investments. As it relates to AI is a great example. And now, of course, cyber is becoming a top factor.
Yeah, that we saw that coming through, particularly on one of the things in this survey that we do is we look at different executive positions and how the different positions might view some of these risks. And what really struck out there was the CEO, particularly top 5 issues, dealt with what you're talking about: innovation. What, from a strategic perspective, how do we invest differently, and trying to understand where do we need to go as the market is shifting in light of then economic challenges. And so we saw, while the economy, as Matt pointed out, was the #1 risk, and that was true across all industries, across all geographies, pretty much across all executive positions, with the exception at that time of the CEO, but that CEO being more focused on this innovation and strategic emerging technologies and how can they deploy that to grow their business and potentially change how they deliver products and services.
Yeah, but see, this is interesting. If you're not thinking with a cyber first or data privacy first strategy, that kind of mentality, there was such a rush starting in 2022 with generative AI becoming a part of the everyday vernacular. So introducing internal and external facing products, was there such a rush to that? And perhaps risk mitigation was an afterthought. I'm curious to see, or get your thoughts on what could that look like in a year or two. We really don't have much to bench that on. I can't recall a product cycle that evolved that quickly, and not even necessarily problems to solve, just something nice to have. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves.
Yeah, I would agree. And it actually comes out in the top 10 from an AI dimension. One, they're worried about the risk of it and making sure we deploy it correctly. But at the same time, they're worried about, do we have the skills to really do it? We want to run with it. I need the skills to be able to compete with that. And they're a little bit focused on, is it going to change my business model and how my competitors might emerge? And could I be disrupted by some unexpected innovation from an AI lens? So I think they're looking at it both the opportunity side, but the risk side, and trying to put the gas pedal on, but the brake at the same time, sort of like, I want to go forward, but I'm going to keep my left foot on the brake, that kind of idea.
Yeah, which is funny because now that you're saying, talking about the gas and the brake pedal here, this is something that we have actually asked auto manufacturers. You think from a designing and engineering perspective, and it's going from production to use within, let's call it 2 years versus 5 years before. But your frontline, do they understand electrical? Do they have the capabilities to service high voltage vehicles? So when you think about the skill sets, right? Getting the product out there doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have the frontline to be able to service a number of these technologies. It's an interesting paradox there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Matt, I think another thing to think about is not necessarily procrastinating when it comes to talent acquisition and retention, because industries of all types are looking for a lot of similar skill sets as well.
Absolutely. And no matter what movements are in the labor market, there's always a war for top talent. And workforce planning is an absolute priority for companies, both as they ensure they're ready to navigate this uncertain environment, but more importantly, they have the skills necessary for the future. As you said, industries are evolving rapidly. The deployment of these technologies will have a profound impact on businesses, but people are needed in order to operate all of these things. And the skills those people need aren't in wide abundance in the current market. And so that's where organizations are really focusing on not just workforce planning and talent acquisition, but training, upskilling, and reskilling to ensure they can retain the expertise within the organization, but also pivot and be ready for what the future requires.
Yeah.
And I think another thing, Matt, to build on that, they're also concerned in some industries about, will my type of industry be attractive to the future workforce? So not only attracting the skill I need, but also are they interested in working in the business line that we might be in? And I think thinking about that from a workforce perspective.
Yeah, but Dr. Beasley, you bring up a really great point because think about you're going to school for comp sci. Does that mean you have to plug and play into one of the big tech players? You could go to an industrial company like Honeywell, right? Or GE, and those same skill sets are required, if not more so, because their entire business models are evolving. I also think from the academic perspective that partnerships between these industries and helping to develop the curricula and having it more targeted for the skill sets that are needed, that's something that I think academia and industry should be collaborating on as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's something at NC State we try to do a lot. We
Yes.
refer to ourselves as the think and do institution, and that we're trying to connect with what's going on in practice. And partnership with Protiviti is a good example of this, because we want to make sure we are putting out the next generation of talent that will be able to meet the market needs and excel for them personally. And some of the areas that we're seeing are things, as you pointed out, skills in digital marketing, digital servicing, even like in healthcare. That healthcare industry is very targeted on people with digital capabilities, just the way healthcare is being delivered. That, to your point, people with those skills can go across multiple industries and play and have real opportunity there.
Yep, that's an excellent point that you make, and I have to give your state, North Carolina, credit. It has done with the community college system an excellent job of partnering with climate tech companies and more emerging tech companies to help develop that curricula and get students to the right place. So I think North Carolina has done a fantastic job from an academic perspective, as well as partnering with their businesses and having an environment that's conducive of that. Matt, back to you. Let's think about going to 2035. 10 years it feels like a long time away, but it's not. I mean, we're already 5 years away from COVID. Look how fast that happened. What do you think the concerns or risks are going to be?
Yeah, it absolutely. And I think what's interesting now is, many of the risks that we see today, as executives look 10 years out, they had similar concerns as they looked on the horizon. So from a risk standpoint, there's not a lot of difference. I think what we see in that, though, is there's reality that this interconnectedness of risks will continue, and it's almost becoming a permanent fixture of the business landscape. So that's one. Economic outlook, we can't predict what the future will hold, but what businesses seem to be very focused on is ensuring they have the skills, the technologies, they're modernizing their workforce, but then, really importantly, their businesses remain resilient and agile to be able to adapt to the changes that will come over the next 10 years. And I think we all know that the seeds of the next, accelerated growth period in the economy are being planted today. And so those businesses that are investing now, modernizing their technology, improving their operations, maintaining their talent, will be well positioned to take advantage of that.
Yeah. And Dr. Beasley, I think, when you think about it through the cyber mindset, going back to that again, moving away from siloed risk management and thinking about cross functionality is going to be key. And, using data-driven analyses and having a framework that isn't just put into place, but it's something that's reviewed and tested and updated and constantly searching for those vulnerabilities. That's certainly going to be key, not even in 10 years, but it's something that needs to be put in practice now.
Totally. We work with organizations all the time to help them build that capability into a more robust online living view of risk managing. Not that risk management's done periodically, it's constant because risks are changing all the time, and finding ways to facilitate cross-sharing of risk insights across the different business functions. Because as we started the conversation, these risks are so interconnected that I cannot go back to my office and manage my risk without talking to you in your office. And so trying to find ways to get that elevated to an aggregate level, and then linking risk to strategy, because risk have some bad risk, but they're risk we have to take, and there's opportunity in risk. And so balancing that, we always like to say it's risk management, not risk mitigation, and that we want to manage the risk, take the smart ones and draw down the bad ones, and do that in a more proactive way, and finding ways to do that in a structured ongoing capability. We'll just put them in a better strategic position.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point that you make because, whether it's risk managers or cybersecurity leadership, privacy leadership, understanding who your audience is and being able to effectively communicate those needs, having a conversation with the board is different than having it with DevOps, and then having, there's always going to be a human in the loop. Every single person in the business unit needs to be aware and practice. It needs to be part of the culture.
Totally. And they're part of the eyes and ears too, to see what's emerging. And so finding a way to facilitate that flow of information is where organizations are trying to enhance that, because and we're seeing it right now, things are moving quickly and fast. There's a lot of uncertainty. And the more that I can get that aggregated into the top, both from the bottom and from the top, sort of that both and, the more likely we'll have those insights that we can then leverage for a strategic decision.
All right.
Maybe
Appreciate
just
both.
to
I'm
build on
sorry. Go ahead,
something-
Matt.
Yeah, sorry, just to build on something you both said. So first, culture is the key differentiator. And secondly, the aggregation and use of the information is not just a data exercise, it's a communication and a translation one. And so those organizations that have pre-existing communication routines, there's good, not just awareness, but understanding within key management committees and board audiences are able to move faster and take advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves, and also mitigate the risks that manifest.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you for adding that in, and thank you for both of your insights and joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.